What does it take on a daily basis? Well, let's take a look at gas station, for instance. You show up in the morning to fuel your vehicle up. You're getting ready to go to work. And when you lift the handle of the pump, as soon as you lift it, it not only prepares it to fill your gas tank, but it also clears the prior bill that needed to be paid. It goes ahead and clears it down to zero. Many of us, when we lift our lid in the morning, we lift the covers off, we get ready to get started. We don't even take the time to be grateful for what we have. We certainly don't clear the day before, the bill of the day before, the things that didn't go right, the things that are hurting us, that are affecting us. We don't necessarily clear all that. So we're adding to what's already there. Can you imagine if that happened at the gas station? It would not take 5 days until the bill would be so great if people continued purchasing that there would be very few people that could even purchase 1 gallon of gas because the already existing bill would be up over millions of dollars in one gas pump, depending on the gas station that it's at. Obviously, that varies based on the traffic that comes through. But if we were to ask an average successful gas station, 9 out of 10, the bill would go up into tens of thousands anyway, for sure into six figures, high six figures, which would take out 98% of the people once it gets into six figures for anybody that's even be able to purchase 1 gallon of gas. They'd have to pay for all of that. I say that to come back and to bring this on the same token to our life and say that if we keep picking up the problems of yesterday and going out today and adding that to what we have today, it's going to be almost impossible eventually to keep moving forward. It will look so big. It will look overwhelming. It will look devastating. It's not going to be possible to move through this. We're going to see nothing but darkness. We will see nothing but depression, nothing but impossibilities ahead of us. I hear this all the time when I'm talking to people. I hear this all the time. The up ahead of me, it just looks impossible to keep moving forward. There's times where I see nothing but darkness. There's times where I see no way possible to move forward. And of course, it's not possible to just suddenly change all of that. That takes practice. It takes commitment to be able to do that. It takes the ability to realize that, hey, listen, I'm bringing the price tag of yesterday with me when I'm trying to fill my day today. There was this one gentleman that got fired from a company. He thought he was going to be there and he was going to be retiring from that company. And he was excited. He enjoyed his work. He loved the people he was working with. He thought he loved the company. He was excited. And all of a sudden, one morning, he was called into the office and they asked him to bring everything that he had, and he did. And they told him he could now move on out. This was his last day. He wasn't going to be even working that day. He was no longer needed. He was devastated. He goes home and he finally gets a different job. But anytime somebody would get within earshot of him, he would share his story, which is okay to share a story, but not in the sense that he did. As he shared his story, he would always conclude the story with, and they fired me for no reason. It wasn't fair, he would say. And he would keep saying that every time he would share his story. It wasn't fair. Although that might be true, it's not fair that birds eat worms either, right? So it didn't seem fair. But the problem is he would never release the price tag of yesterday, and his life was gloom and doom for the rest of his life. He never really got to enjoy life because he would have nothing on his mind but that. Now we might say, well, that was stupid. Why did he keep bringing that up? Why didn't he take a look at what he had where he was at? Why didn't he try to move up in that company? Why didn't he try to serve with the greatest purpose there? I can't answer that. I don't know. I'll tell you of another one, though. And by the way, every person that owns a company, wants to have shareholders, is at the risk of getting fired of their own company. Steve Jobs started one of the biggest, best companies of all time, Apple. As he was building that company, he kind of got a little bit radical in the early 30s of his life, and his leadership might not have been where he should have been, and he made some mistakes. But The company was growing, it was profitable, it was moving up, and the shareholders and the people inside the company didn't think it was being run the right way, and so they got together and agreed and voted upon to fire Steve Jobs from his own company. And they could. And they did. He was fired from his own company, which is a multi-billion-dollar company. So as he was fired from that, this was a public humiliation. The newspapers, the news outlets, televisions, everybody talked about it. Steve Jobs fired from the company that he started 12 years ago as a teenager. He'd started this in his garage and it turned into a multi-billion-dollar company. He was humiliated, devastated. But it didn't take him 1 month. He tried to get back. He tried to apologize. He tried to do everything. They wouldn't hear of it. They finally said he could come back as an employee working in a certain low area, but he would have no influence. So Steve Jobs took the humiliation, and after about a month of that, he decided, you know what? I still didn't lose my love for what I do. And so he began another company to build another company called Pixar. And he tried to forget about what had happened and tried to just focus on that company. As he did, he basically reached over and lifted the handle of the gas pump, and as he did, it cleared what had been there before, and he began to build a company called Pixar. And it didn't matter. I really can't tell you exactly how many years down the road. I do remember being in Winston-Salem when this subject was brought up by some major investors. Apple was going downhill fast. I'll never forget where one of the guys, a good friend of mine, said, how low can Apple actually go? His investments had just crashed. Everything went down. And so I'll never forget at that point in time, I had not invested in Apple, and I was surprised to hear how this guy was vexed by what was happening, but he just made a statement of it in front of the room as he was speaking, and he continued on with his subject. But I could tell, obviously, by the emotions that he put behind what he said, that this is a big deal. Let's move forward. At that point in time, the company all of a sudden realized they needed to do one thing. They needed to bring somebody back in that knew how to run a company. And with great humiliation, they talked to Steve Jobs and Bill Gates to see if, Steve would come back in, maybe even the two of them, to help out with keeping the company on track. Already by this time, Dell was on their was up there cracking the whip and rattling the sabers and trying to make sure that Apple does completely go out. Steve Jobs finally committed to come back if he could have the full control of running the company. And they gladly gave him that spot because as it was, they were dying. He came back and started to run the company again. It began to turn around. But the beautiful thing with this now is now he had Pixar to add to it. iTunes, iPods, all those things were added. And so the company came back stronger than ever and more powerful than ever. So had Steve Jobs shared the story of the other guy that I was talking to you about, the one that always concluded his story with, it wasn't fair. Had Steve Jobs have done that, I wouldn't be sharing this story today. There would be no story, possibly no Apple to talk about, certainly not anything of significance. But you see, he cleared the pump of the day before and didn't pay the price every morning when he woke up. He cleared the pump and just bought what he needed that day. And he went out and began to make it happen with starting a brand new company. That would be my challenge for every person on here, Julie, is to release the day before's price tag. When we fill up again this morning on this call or whatever it is that energizes us, our thoughts, the ability to develop a positive attitude, our ability to be grateful for what we have today and looking forward to what's coming up today as we do this and we clear the pumps of yesterday, gives us the ability to have a Steve Jobs story, not the individual that I don't even have the name to, but I do know his story very well. That always concluded his story with, that wasn't fair. All of us have had things happen that wasn't fair. The only time the Bible used the word fair was when it was to talk about skin tone, skin color. It never uses the word fair in terms of something wasn't done correctly, because if we took a look at the story of the talents, we would say that wasn't fair. It says that God took away from the one that had the least and gave it to the one that had the most. Most of y'all, if I was to say I'm going to do that, you'd say, oh, that's not fair. But yet we have a story shared by the greatest teachers of all times as a parable.
With that being said, guys, make it a great day, and do me a favor. As always, remember, don't settle for less than who you are. May God bless you.